Sylvia Plath's fig tree metaphor from her one and only novel, The Bell Jar, has haunted generations of young adults. Terrifying necessity of choosing a path, a career, a life, while the future remains painfully vague. To choose one fig is to forfeit all others. Ever since reading The Bell Jar, Plath's voice have lingered in the back of my mind, resurfacing again and again, especially at moments of transition. This persistence raises a question that feels as urgent today as it did in 1963. Is career anxiety justified? In other words, was Sylvia Plath right? Is our life sealed the moment we choose a major, accept a job, or commit to a romantic partner? Or are these fears shaped, perhaps distorted, by the perspective of a deeply depressed young woman whose questions were constrained and silenced by a patriarchal society? Although the novel's plot is not the central focus of this essay, a brief overview is necessary to situate Plath's ideas. The Bell Jar is Sylvia Plath's one and only novel, first published in 1963 under the pseudonym Victoria Lucas. It is a fictionalized autobiography that follows the collegiate life of Esther Greenwood, a young aspiring poet. Esther is given the opportunity to spend a month in New York, working for a prestigious magazine, an experience that should, in theory, represent success and promise. Instead, it deepens her sense of alienation and despair. Her internship marks the first explicit articulation of her anxiety about the future. She questions her abilities, doubts her career aspirations, and wrestles with the expectation of marriage. After the internship ends, Esther returns to her hometown and is forced to spend the summer with her mother. This return triggers a severe depressive episode, culminating in multiple suicide attempts. Eventually, she is admitted to a psychiatric hospital where she endures a prolonged struggle with mental illness. By the novel's final chapters, Esther appears more stable and prepares to return to college, though she remains acutely aware that the suffocating presence of depression could descend upon her at any moment, contemplating whether the Bell Jar, with its stifling distortions, wouldn't descend again. It is in chapter 7 that Esther's now famous fig tree metaphor appears. The image captures her paralysis in the face of choice, whether to become a mother, a poet, a professor, or a traveler. Each fat purple fig represents a possible future, equally enticing and full of promise. Yet, choosing one means relinquishing all the others. Unable to decide, Esther watches as the figs wrinkled and went black, and one by one they plopped to the ground at my feet. The metaphor distills the agony of indecision and the fear that, in waiting too long, all potential futures may be lost. To understand the novel's initial reception and the resonance of this metaphor, it is impossible to ignore the historical and cultural conditions in which The Bell Jar was written and published, particularly the situation of women in the 1950s and 60s in the Western world, especially in the United States and Western Europe. In the 1950s, women largely did not have the freedom of choice that Esther imagines. Their futures were often predetermined, attending university not for the intellectual fulfillment, but to pass time before marriage, meeting a man who suited familial expectations, marrying, having children, and maintaining a beautiful home. This was especially true for white middle-class women. The ideal woman of the 1950s was a homemaker, cheerful, nurturing, and entirely devoted to her husband and children. Without complaint, she cooked, she cleaned, she ensured dinner was ready by 6 o'clock every single day. This image was reinforced by schools, magazine, and television programs alike. Because men were expected to be the sole breadwinners, married women were actively discouraged from working. In fact, many employers in the early 1950s still enforced a marriage ban, which prohibited married women from holding certain jobs, particularly in teaching and clerical work. Women who were employed were often dismissed upon marriage. Yet this idealized domestic narrative masked a deeper dissatisfaction. Many women felt that something essential was missing, a sense of self independent of their family, a personality not defined by their husbands. From this absence emerged a growing desire for autonomy. The 1960s marked a period of social and cultural upheaval. Women increasingly rejected confines of suburban domesticity, and dissatisfaction with prescribed gender roles became more visible. Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique from 1963 famously articulated this discontent, helping to ignite the second-wave feminist movement. While it became more common for married women to work, often part-time, inequality persisted. By 1960, approximately 38% of married women were employed, yet they were routinely dismissed upon pregnancy and continued to earn way less than men for the same work. Emerging in the late 1960s, the women's liberation movement sought to address systematic injustices, including reproductive rights, workplace discrimination, and domestic violence. Given the historical, societal, and cultural context, it is unsurprising that the Belger was not an immediate commercial success upon its publication in 1963. Released under a pseudonym and delayed in several countries due to family sensitivities, the novel was not widely recognized as the literary masterpiece it is considered today. While some early reviewers praised its sharp, sarcastic voice and poetic skill, it took years for its significance to be fully acknowledged. Yet, even then, the fig tree metaphor struck a nerve, perhaps because it articulated a fear that had not yet found language. Today, the novel's legacy feels more relevant than ever. Young people appear to have an abundance of choices. We can decide whether to attend university at all, which careers to pursue, whether to have children, and if so, how many. And yet, the question remains the same. Why, in a world that promises endless opportunity, do we feel such overwhelming pressure and anxiety when it comes to choosing? As Pisarik and colleagues suggest, contemporary career anxiety is experiential and complex, not merely a collection of measurable symptoms. It is deeply existential in nature. Individuals fear choosing the wrong life. There is immense pressure to construct meaning through work in a world that offers no inherent structure. The awareness of freedom, responsibility, and the demand for authenticity itself generates anxiety. Central to this experience is a fear of uncertainty and ambiguity, not knowing what the future holds, doubting one's self-knowledge, and lacking trust in one's own decisions. These fears reflect an existential anxiety, rooted in the necessity of creating structure through choice, a modern echo of Esther Greenwood still standing beneath the fig tree. It is hardly surprising that this anxiety is intensified by social media. Constant comparison, public scrutiny, and the relentless demand for validation exacerbate an already fragile state of becoming. In a generation where everyone seems to have life figured out by the age of 22, the sensation of falling behind can arrive almost instantly. Endless posts celebrating side hustles, perpetual productivity, and meticulously curated futures turn choice into something ominous. What should feel like freedom begins to resemble a threat, and the necessity of choosing a path becomes more frightening than ever. There are, however, crucial differences between our figs and esters. Today, the figs appear infinite, constantly evolving, multiplying, and reshaping themselves. Yet, embedded within this abundance is something inherently corrosive. The fig tree no longer stands quietly before us. Its fruit is broadcast daily, curated, filtered, and monetized. Our possible futures are observed, measured, and publicly ranked. After all, who are we as humans if not creatures quick to judge? Who would dare to choose a path that does not promise a six-figure income or confer intellectual prestige? The paralysis we experience today may be of a different nature. Rather than being constrained by a deeply misogynistic society, we are restricted by perception, by how others see us. These anxieties have led me to believe that we are all in some way living beneath badgers of our own. Suspended beneath transparent glass, we exist like birds in a cage, visible, observed, and quietly contained. The oppression here is not imposed by depression alone, but by visibility itself. Our fear of being judged, dismissed, or looked down upon constructs a prison that appears invisible, yet feels inescapable. In a cultural moment where a private decision can swiftly become a public failure, this fear is not unfounded. One might argue that this interpretation is overly dramatic, that such pressure only exists if one chooses to participate by posting online or sharing one's life publicly. To those who might feel this way, I ask, have you noticed how media treats women's choices lately? Can you recall the scrutiny a woman has endured in the public eye in recent years? If I pause to think, several names come to mind. The fear of choosing incorrectly, then, is far from irrational, socially and privately. The fig tree metaphor suggests that choosing a career is equivalent to choosing an identity, a personality, a role to inhabit. In the 1950s, particularly for women confined to domestic life, this fear was justified. When identity was reduced to marriage and motherhood, when a life consisted of a single rigid narrative, hesitation was inevitable. Today, however, lives are no longer singular. People inhabit multiple identities at once. They change careers, start families, or do not, reinvent themselves at 50, discover and rediscover passions, relationships, and versions of themselves long thought lost. Identity is no longer a fixed decision made once and for all. Why then does the belief persist that identity must be chosen early and locked into place? Why is uncertainty framed as weakness rather than inevitability? And who ultimately benefits from this manufactured urgency? Perhaps the true tragedy is not choosing the wrong fig, but believing there is only one that is right.